That is a bold statement to say that Tomorrowland is the perfect land, absolutely flawless. That is a bold Disneyland statement. Tomorrowland, another land that's been edited a lot. Now, we're on the sky buckets here, which weren't opening on opening day, but it does give us that great view from above. But Tomorrowland was basically Disney's version of making a World's Fair, giving people the promise of tomorrow. Now, we still have a rocket that sits in Tomorrowland, but it's not the original rocket and it's not nearly as big. Autopia, the real flagship opening day attraction, was showing us a highway system that we didn't have at the time. The Eisenhower interstate system wouldn't open up till like a year after Disneyland would open. So this was literally not only giving some little folks the first time to ride in a car that they were driving, but giving many adults the promise of a transportation system that America hadn't developed yet. That kid's not a good driver. Here we see an Autopia that doesn't have the middle guardrail, meaning that you actually were driving your car. And in fact, a couple of kids were able to get the Autopia vehicles off of the pathway, even made it as far down to Main Street. Autopia worked so well, they said, let's redo it with boats. And they made one of the worst attractions ever at Disneyland. It just didn't work on a boat attached to a rope. But outside of Autopia, which was forward-facing at the time, showing people a highway system that they're not able to travel on, where LA to New York would all be connected through a system of highways, the rest of Tomorrowland was showing people a World's Fair type environment, giving people a promise of what the future could possibly hold. But even though Tomorrowland didn't have a lot of attractions, it had a lot of spirit. And I believe a lot of people love to come into it and see what the idea of the atomic age could materialize. Now, the Tomorrowland we have today has trees all around it, has buildings all around it. We can't see out. But this Tomorrowland of 55, a little bare. And there were attractions like a clock that people love to look at. I have to say, nobody worked harder in the 50s than the Astronaut. Imagine walking around Anaheim in a Hot Pockets Crispin sleeve with a fishbowl over your head. Two things that would not go well with the weather and sun of Anaheim. And in fact, if anybody's not making it in to 2020 Disneyland, it's this guy, because he's running a temperature. He's going to be way too hot to get into the park. But the real heart of Disneyland in 55 and in 2020 for 60 years has been Fantasyland. The smallest, the original Disneyland castle, something that the company's been known for. So proud of our little castle. When Disneyland would open up, there was no movie called Sleeping Beauty. Everybody thought Walt would make a castle after Cinderella because that movie was already out. But Walt, being the steadfast marketer, he said, no, we're going to make it for Sleeping Beauty. Because years later, when the movie comes out, the park will help market the movie. Forward thinking as always. This bandstand, which now is where the Fantasy Fair exists in Disneyland, the first Disneyland Christmases, they would play Christmas music over here. They called it the Disney, I think it was the Disney Christmas Ball. Off the top of my head, I believe that's what it was called. But the original Fantasyland would be themed after a Renaissance fair. It wouldn't be till 83 when they would make New Fantasyland that would give it that European village vibe. It was a much more raw, a much simpler Fantasyland. And here is a look at the original storybook canals, where you had no landscaping, no little buildings. It was literally one of the worst attractions, but they got it open on opening day. 2 months later, they would shut it down. And it works out well that they didn't have it all dialed in on opening day, because the original idea was to put little buildings, little famous landmarks from around the world all over the canals. That would not only ruin the need for It's a Small World 10 years later, but it would rob us of having the opportunity to go around set pieces from all of our favorite films. So it's good that this one wasn't exactly ready on opening day. But Fantasyland gave children that thing that they were looking for, but it also gave adults a way to redream, There's some 1955 nightmare fuel for you. The attractions had these crests or shields that were outside of them. There was a crest for Snow White, there was a crest for Peter Pan, and one for Toad's Hall. This was kind of what let you know what part of the Renaissance Fair that you were going into, because they didn't have the characters inside of the attraction. So really, the only time you would see Snow White, because you were supposed to be Snow White, was on this little plaque out front before you would walk in to go on a very scary 2.5 minutes of your young life. Now, there are 2 attractions at Disneyland that have been moved: the Teacups and Dumbo. Dumbo now sits where the original Captain Hook's boat sits now. So that boat would be torn down. It was built on the cheap. The Chicken of the Sea Pirate restaurant was built more like a set piece, more like something that they were used to building on set up in Burbank. So it wasn't designed to last for the long haul. When it got torn down, pieces of it were placed inside of Peter Pan. I wish that pirate ship was still there so badly. Give me that pirate ship. That would be amazing. When I went to Disneyland Paris, I was so excited to see something that looked very similar to that. And in its original spot, Dumbo the Flying Elephant would be moved to take its spot. Here's one of the old ticket booths where you would go up and you would buy a ticket A through E. That ticket booth is still there. When you go to ride Casey Jr. next time, it sits on the far left. There's the Casey Jr. lacking all of the landscaping that now keeps us from being able to see past it to see Small World that now lives behind it. But Disney, controversial, still putting kids in cages. Casey Jr., an attraction of the 50s, but not an opening day. It would be the first attraction that would open up after the park. They just couldn't get it ready for opening day. So close, Casey Jr., to be in the class of 1955. They're the teacups sitting dead center in the middle of Fantasyland. We still have the only teacups around the world that are open air. These original teacups had no brakes on them, so you could literally spin them as hard as your little heart desired. It's hard to think of an attraction other than the teacups and Dumbo that are a bigger icon of Disneyland. And its new rebuilt out looks like a small, big top, a small fair. They did a fantastic job of really giving this opening day classic the footprint that it deserves. Now you fly above a fountain. It has all of the music and the vibe around it. From this view, you really do get to see sort of the whole courtyard. It's a rare view to see the whole courtyard of Fantasyland. Oh, what a time. If anybody wants to do something cool with VR, make me a VR Fantasyland or a 55 Disneyland that I can go through and experience what it was like to see this modest, more park version of Disneyland. It's funny, we talked about this in the podcast. As the years have gone on, the castle's paint job has gotten more and more extreme. It was pretty muted back in the day, but as the years have gone on, the castle has gotten more saturated as cameras have gotten more higher resolution. There it is from the backside looking in. Jiminy Cricket. There's a little more 50s nightmare fuel for you. Oh, look at that nightmare fuel. Pretty impressive to think that for 65 years that this has been an American icon, and just how many people globally have come here for a day or for several. Monstro wasn't an original. That would be added in the rehab. But they did want to make a Monstro attraction where it was like a water slide where you'd slide out of his mouth. Give me that sky bucket. Not an opening day classic, but I put it in here just because it really does offer vintage feelings and also gives you some interesting viewpoints that we're robbed of today because we can't float over Fantasyland into Tomorrowland. Some of the best photos of this area were taken from the sky buckets. So cool. So cool to be able to see it all from above. So great. There you go, friends. Happy birthday, Disneyland. I am so proud to be one of your citizens, to live near you, to be able to go as often as possible. I absolutely just adore and love this place so much. Next Friday, I will be celebrating a full operational day of Disneyland where I will be live streaming for 18 hours, keeping the exact schedule that Disneyland runs on. Hopefully, you'll come and join me and we'll get to do some Disneyland together. Here's some very rare aerial photos of the park way back when. So next Friday, if you want to celebrate the birthday of Disneyland with me, you can show up and we will do a 18-hour stream. I will start at 7 and go to 1 a.m. I will adhere to all of the schedules of Disneyland. We'll walk around it virtually. We'll ride lots of POV attractions. We'll watch the parades. We'll watch the fireworks. We will do a full day of Disneyland together. Hey, citizens of Disneyland, I hope you enjoyed today's video. You can find other installments of this series looking back 65 years at the class of 1955, what Disneyland was like in its origin. By all means, if you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, follow the channel. All of these things help me justify this insane amount of time that I put into making these. And if you want to hang out with me any Friday, I do a Twitch Disneyland live stream, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Disneyland time, of course, each and every Friday. And don't forget, you can find me every Wednesday over on the podcast, Disneyland For Designers. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope to see you real soon, either here or at Disneyland.